Testing. Well, aloha kakahi aka kako. He leo mahalo ya oko e kumulona i kua, kumu kaleo Trinidad a mena o lapa I ke aloha ana mai. O wao no o Kahele Kahele, no miloli'i moko o kiawe ka ohana Kahele, o ko aloha nui a me ka mahalo ya oko e nakanaka o ke ia aina o Kapālama, o ke Kula o Kamehameha, a me na kanaka a pau o neia pai aina o Hawaiʻi. Mahalo, mahalo nui, ka hoʻokipa olu olu, ana mai, aloha. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you this morning and to be a part of this professional opportunity to continue to develop the skills that will equip and empower each of you to be effective and inspiring leaders on this campus and throughout our island community. I want to mahalo the Kamehameha School's Kapālama leadership team for making the decision to have this professional day of development focused on inspiration and Hawaiian culture-based learning. Mahalo, po'okula Dr. Taryn Chun, Kula ha'a kie and va'ena na po'okumu Didi Santiago, Kula Gawain Hailey and Wendy Erskine, their campus leadership, faculty, and staff. Today's event organizers, the Director of Teaching and Learning Innovation, Shauna Medeiros, mahalo for that introduction, and to all of you in attendance or those tuning in virtually, again, mahalo, mahalo for having me. You know, before I move on, I want to acknowledge everyone, all of you on this campus, who has been affected by this tragedy that is COVID-19. Nothing could have prepared us for this deadly pandemic, the devastating loss of life, the total disruption of our personal and professional lives. It has fractured families, friends, professional relationships, and in some cases has brought out the very worst in people. The COVID-19 has challenged and stressed each and every one of us, especially you, our educators, to adjust and readjust again. And I know you're tired and have worked through much discomfort for the comfort of your students, your families, your colleagues, and others. And so mahalo for remaining focused and steadfast in your positions, committed to serving the 3,192 haumana and their families that call this campus their home, that depend on each and every one of you and the critical decisions you make every day to keep their children safe. These haumana, from our Papa Mala'o to our Papa Umi Kumalua, our Papa Alakai, are the greatest hope for the future of Hawaii and the world. So on behalf of Hawaii's congressional delegation, mahalo, mahalo, nui loa. It was back in late September of this year when your administration reached out with an invitation to kick off this day with an opportunity to talk about OEV leadership and what that means to me in the context of what it takes to be an effective Native Hawaiian leader. It's an important conversation to have with all of you because of the crucial role and responsibility Kamehameha plays in the cultivation of the next generation of OEV leaders. Through education, inspiration, and critical thinking grounded in Native Hawaiian values, every administrator, teacher, coach, staff member on this campus can influence a student who, when they leave here, will have the capabilities to meet the challenges of the global stage and help improve and advance our community, our state, and our nation. So what is OEV leadership, Native leadership? Here in Hawaii, it's an important question to answer, as we've all experienced good leaders, bad leaders, but if there is one thing paramount to the success of any organization, any team, that is leadership. Someone has to lead, and the success or failure of any organization largely depends on effective leadership. Now, leadership, by definition, is the process of influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish the mission and improve the organization. For me, leadership actually begins way before someone is put in a position of leadership. I believe what makes an effective Oiwi leader begins with an individual's values. A deep understanding of who and what we are. What do we self-identify with? Values define a person and how someone will live their life. Values can be instilled from a parent, a coach, a teacher, a kupuna. But there is a direct correlation with an individual's values and their culture and their history, their experiences, how they were raised, where they were raised, what I like to refer to as an anchor, a connection that binds the Oiwi leader, something, some place, some person. So my question to you is, what is your anchor? What is your connection? Because that is the foundation for Oiwi leadership. For me, that anchor is in my ancestral home of Miloli'i, South Kona, on the island of Hawaii, Mokuokiawe. One of the last native Hawaiian fishing villages in these islands, and the closest native Hawaiian settlement in Hawaii today to our ancient home in Kahiki. My dad, the late Gilbert Kahele, was born there in 1942. His father was born there. His father's father was born there. They were pure Hawaiians. And they came for generations from this area, from Kalai to Kona. They were fishermen. Miloli'i, for those of you that have had an opportunity to go there, you can see the Hau'oli Kamana'o Church, the Miloli'i Beach Park. This is Omoka'a, the local ia, the Miloli'i Wharf, and for those of you, the rest of the village. But Miloli'i is famous for its opelo. It's known for its opelo. And my family were fishermen. And although my sister and I lived in Hilo, we went to school in Hilo. From a very young age, my dad took us often and raised us in Miloli'i. It is where my anchor began and the development of my values that today shape and guide me as an Oiwi leader. My dad, after returning to Hawaii from the United States Marine Corps, had a chance encounter and was inspired by Daniel Akaka in 1976, when I was just 2 years old. And he became, my dad, a young leader in the Miloli'i village. And he was very much a part of what is known as the Hawaiian Renaissance of the 1970s and the 1980s. I had the fortunate opportunity to experience that, to observe him in that role, to learn from kupuna like Mona Kahele, Diana Aki, Anakala Eddie Ka'anana, Walter Paulo, Uncle Gino Kalpiko, many of them all Kamehameha grads as well. I had the opportunity to listen to them speak Olelo Hawaii, to hear the mele from Miloli'i and from South Kona and from that place, to learn how to catch opelo, to live off the ocean, to hear them talk about our history, our culture, to watch them live those Hawaiian values. One of those experiences I'll share with you happened in Miloli'i in the summer of 1985. Hokulea has now made 2 voyages to Tahiti, 1976, 1980. And they are making their 3rd voyage to Aotearoa on the voyage of rediscovery. And they are leaving Hawaii from Miloli'i. And it is where I get an opportunity to spend time with and to meet Mau Piailu, the Micronesian navigator from Satawal in the Carolinian Islands that had taught Hokulea's crew the ancient practice of celestial and deep sea navigation. Hokulea gets delayed for a few weeks, and on one of those days, while down in the village, my dad pulls Mao aside and says, "Hey, can you mind teaching my boy, my son, this thing I've always heard about that you teach the Hokulea navigators, the star compass? Can you teach my boy?" Mao says, "Sure. Bring him down to the Miloli Halau, and I'll teach him the star compass." And so I'm 11 years old. We meet at the Miloli Halau. Mao takes out this big sheet of paper. He puts it on the table with a couple of rocks, takes out a single coconut frond, instantly weaves it into a va'a, and proceeds to teach me and draw the star compass in his native Micronesian language. There's my dad, and there's me. At night, Mao would take me outside with the map, and he would teach me the stars above Miloli. I'm 11 years old. I would sleep on Hokulea in Miloli in the harbor. I learned from that experience that our ancestors, this is the map, and I still have it. It's in my office in Washington, D.C. It's one of the treasured things that our family has. But I learned from that experience that our ancestors were great navigators who could sail and endure thousands of miles across the deep ocean with no modern instruments and nail their destination with pinpoint accuracy by memorizing celestial bodies and understanding and connecting themselves to nature and the elements. This experience at a young age would ignite my interest and start to pave the way for what would become my later pursuit as a pilot. So identify your anchor. I shared with you what mine is. What is your anchor? And I encourage you today, when you leave this auditorium and you go on your huaka'is, to think about that. Your anchor will lead to your values. Your values will form the foundation of your leadership style and effectiveness. Once you have established that, you can then define OEV leadership qualities, attributes, and traits of a successful and effective OEV leader. And then you can teach that to your students, your children, your players, your colleagues. Today, I am 47 years old. I'm fortunate that over the last 30 years, I've been given the opportunity to develop leadership principles that I think are essential for any future OEV leader. Whether it was playing collegiate volleyball at the University of Hawaii in the 1990s, serving for the last 20 years in the Hawaii Air National Guard, flying for the last 12 years as a commercial airline pilot for Hawaiian Airlines, leading Pa'apono Miloli'i, a nonprofit that my dad started in 1980 in the village, representing Hilo in the Hawaii State Senate, and now in the United States Congress. I believe I have developed and honed the skills necessary to lead highly effective and successful teams. And I would like to share a few of those that I think are critically important. I've created a word cloud of qualities and values around OEV leadership. Many of these words, I am sure, are familiar to you. Some may not be, but every word on here is critical and essential quality or value for any successful OEV leader. Earlier, I gave you the textbook definition of leadership, and let me expand on that just for a minute, and then I'll talk about a few of the values. Highly successful leaders must have the ability to give a group definition and direction. In the military, we call that mission, vision, values. This is the first step in the infancy stages of putting together a team, or when you are given the opportunity to lead. It is often overlooked and can prove fatal for any leader and can be detrimental to the morale and success of the organization if this first step is not done. Your mission, vision, and values should be clear, concise, and well-conceived. To get maximum buy-in, it should be developed and supported by the senior leadership. Sounds like this is something you did when you read Kalakaʻa's book. It should be explained and understood and embraced by everyone else on the team. The critical difference between teams that thrive and teams that fail hinges on the clarity and vision of the organization's mission, vision, and values. Repetition is also very important, and so your mission, vision, and values should be reviewed periodically. Our entire congressional team, DC and Hawaiʻi, reviews our mission, vision, and values every Monday as part of our weekly all-hands meetings. Our interns are tested on their ability to grasp this concept, mission, vision, and values, which is, I really believe, a team's roadmap to success. Now that we have established the foundational tenets of ʻōiwi leadership, let me talk about a few of the essential principles of ʻōiwi leadership that I think are paramount for the success of any leader. The alakaʻi. Leaders lead from the front. They lead by example. They are at the forward edge on the front lines of the team so that the rest of the team will follow their example and respect their judgment, leadership ability, and their knowledge, the alakaʻi. As a leader, don't ever ask your team to do something or anything you would not be willing to do yourself. Lokahi. Leaders foster teamwork. They foster unity. The famous saying, there is no I in team. An experienced leader does not favor individuals or treat specific players or members of the team differently. But leaders foster cooperation with all team members. Kupono. Leaders are honest and have the highest level of integrity. They have strong moral character. They possess the desire to act ethically in all situations. When they say something, they make a commitment that is unbreakable. Leaders hold themselves and their team to the highest standards at all times. Ho'okanaka. Leaders stand tall and make decisions. Leaders are not indecisive. Decisiveness can have fatal consequences in any organization or team. President Theodore Roosevelt once said, in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing you can do is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is to do nothing. So gather all the information, all the facts, make a decision, and once you have made up your mind, stick to that decision. Imi na'au, seek knowledge. Be a student of the past. History offers us a wealth of knowledge and information to those who have the foresight to seek it. Just about every mistake in the history of the world by any leader has already been made. So read about it, learn about it, study past leaders, learn from their mistakes so as not to repeat them yourself. Finally, malama. Take care of your people. Invest in their personal and professional development. Ensure they receive proper recognition for their achievements. Let them know that you care about them. Take an interest in their personal lives and the hard work that they do. Remember their birthday. It's the little things that make a big, big difference. These are just a few, they're not all of them, but they're just a few of the essential principles that I believe create an effective and successful ʻōiwi leader. But let's take it one step further. What separates the ʻōiwi leader from other kinds of leaders? If you went to a leadership training course on the mainland, Dale Carnegie, Tony Robbins, you went to the Military War College, Harvard, Cornell, you will find many, these are the English translation words, you will find many, if not all, of these principles, these qualities, these traits that make a successful leader. You could probably go online and find these. But I believe that there is something else that distinguishes the Oiwi Hawaiian leader. And what is it? There are hundreds of members of Congress, some of the best and the brightest leaders in the nation, my colleagues. What makes me, Kai Ali'i Kahele, as a Hawaiian Oiwi leader, different from them? And that is aloha. Hawaiians' greatest gift to the world. So what is aloha? That's a question for you. Give me a word, Dr. Chun. What is aloha? One word.
Love.
Umi, one word. How about over here? One word that aloha means to you. I don't know your name, but you have a beautiful shirt. You're wearing ula ula. Yes. Integrity. How about way up there?
Charity.
Ele, charity. Aloha is more than just a greeting. It is a life force. It is a condition. It is a mindset. It is a way of life and an attitude that defines who we are and why we are here. In the Congress in Washington, D.C., every day, I try and I do carry the aloha spirit with me. I always wear a lei on the floor of the United States House of Representatives because it distinguishes me as a member from Hawaii. And on the rare occasion when I'm rushing and I forget my lei, my colleagues call me out and like, hey, where's your lei? Or they don't say lei. They're like, oh, where's your beads? Because I'm usually wearing one kukui or one koa. Where's your beads? Oh, your beads, nice, your beads. But I wear lei when I go on the floor of the U.S. House. Every time I pass my colleagues in the hallways, the tunnels, crossing Independence Avenue, walking to the Capitol, I always greet them with aloha. And every once in a while, they pull me aside and ask, what does that word aloha actually mean? And in that moment, they have invited me in, and I can share with them Hawaii and the aloha spirit that distinguishes the Oiwi leader. I have now found, after 11 months of doing this, that when they see me coming, they're telling me aloha before I tell them aloha, which must be working, right? So, but I think Auntie Pilahi Paki said it best. The world will turn to Hawaii as they search for peace, because Hawaii has the key, and that key is aloha. That is my personal philosophy on Oiwi leadership, and I hope you were able to take away a few things from that to help each and every one of you become an Oiwi leader on this campus, in your community, in your families, and in the organizations that you represent. Now, I get the opportunity this morning to acknowledge 3 outstanding Oiwi leaders. Kamehameha Kumu, whose names and accolades were shared with me by their Po'okumu administrators, because these kumu embody the essence, the culture, the values of this campus, which is Eola. So wherever you are, whether here or joining virtually, please kui luna, please stand and be recognized. First, outstanding Kamehameha Kumu. Kumu Debbie Wayne, representing Kula Ha'aha'a. Kumu Wayne incorporates 21st century skills while weaving in cultural connections seamlessly with her science and curriculum. Second, from Kula Va'ena, Brad Wee. And I know I saw him. Kumui embeds alakai lave lave, servant leadership, and deep pilina into his math classes to make learning meaningful for his students. Mahalo. And finally, representing Kula Ki'eki'e, Kumu Kahanu Solatorio. E Kumu Olelo Hawaiʻi, Kumu Solatorio shares his passion for Olelo Hawaiʻi beyond his classroom with more than 22,400 followers on his Instagram account, including myself last night. Had to check him out. So follow him on his Instagram account. It's at E Ho'opilimai. 22,400 followers. That is impressive. So mahalo e nā kumu. Now, I would be remiss if I did not recognize my staff. And Shauna mentioned that in her opening. In fact, some of you may know them because they have walked the hills of Kapālama and they've walked this campus. Working in a congressional office in Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District Office requires grit, mental toughness, they gotta deal with me, and at times can be physically grueling because of the long hours. Many of my staff will start their mornings at 7, 8 o'clock and be still engaged in an activity at 11 o'clock at night because there is a neighborhood board and there's about 13 of them in our district on this aina, and they're on the call so that they can have their 3 minutes to give the congressional update to that particular neighborhood board. So when choosing my team, it was important to me that each member shared the values of Aloha, and Aloha is embedded in our mission, vision, and values. Members of my staff are held to an extremely high standard and level of performance. Sometimes they're asked to perform well after the typical workday has ended and on weekends. And as servant leaders, they answer the call for the constituents we serve. And so I'm very, very, very grateful for all they do. Mostly, as I have come to learn from them, and they remind me often, I'm grateful to Ke Ali'i Pawahi and to the faculty and staff of Kamehameha schools who have helped shape these 8 members of my current team into the industrious men and women that they are today. Of the 21 full or part-time members of Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District, it's like running one small business, you know. 8 are Napua o Pawahi, and they are here with me today. And so I'd like to take the time to acknowledge each of them. First of all, Ikaika Mahoi, our Deputy Chief of Staff, please stand. Based on Oahu, Kamehameha Hawaii Class of 2006. Zoe Leonard, caseworker and internship program coordinator based in Hilo, Kamehameha Hawaii Class of 2015. Mike Contrades, Kauai Field Representative, based on the Garden Island, Kamehameha Schools Kapālama Class of 1988. Hanale Leloy, Director of Constituent Services and Hawaii Island Field Representative, based in Hilo, Kamehameha Hawaii Class of 2015. Dave Chun, who just arrived from Washington, D.C. 2 days ago, our Senior Policy Advisor on Agriculture, based in Washington, D.C., KS Kapālama, Class of 1970. Raz Makaula, Director of Communications and Oahu Field Representative, Waimanalo girl, based on Oahu, KS Kapālama Class of 1991. And finally, Jasmine Bronco, Executive Assistant and Office Manager, based in Hilo, KS Kapālama Class of 1999. I don't know if there's ever been a congressional district office for Hawaii or team that has had more KS graduates on their staff, something I'm very, very proud of. They were a last-minute surprise. The kids were supposed to go back to Hilo yesterday so they could go to school. But we decided to keep them here, and I'm so glad that we did. So I'd also like to recognize the person who holds it all together in our family, my wife, Maria Kahele, and our daughters, Iolana Malaya and Namaka o Kahai Naea of Ke Kula o Navahi o Kalani o Pu. So in closing, I'd like to leave you with this final thought. And it is that you never know when you will have an opportunity to change and influence a child's life. Every one of you is influential to the well-being, careers, and lives of your students. What they will become, who they will be, how they will give back to their communities, how they will raise their families, how they will be the next future generations of Oiwi leaders to represent Hawaii in our government, to represent Hawaii on the world stage, to change the world. Earlier, I had mentioned my dad's special relationship he had with Senator Akaka. That began in 1976. The year Daniel Akaka was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, 2nd Congressional District, same seat that I represent today. The first time a Native Hawaiian since statehood had ever been elected to represent Hawaii in Congress. 8 years later, in 1984, our family took our first trip to Washington, D.C. Congressman Danny Akaka has been in the House now for 8 years. He greeted our ohana with warmth and aloha. His staff set up all kinds of stuff for our family to do in Washington, D.C., just like my staff does for people who come to D.C. from Hawaii. Our family went to the Smithsonian Museums. We went to the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the White House. Ronald Reagan was the President of the United States. And at the end of our trip, we had a breakfast with Congressman Akaka in the House of Representatives dining room. And just before we left and said goodbye, we went outside on the East Promenade and stood on the steps of the U.S. Capitol and took this picture. My dad was so proud that a Native Hawaiian was representing Hawaii in Congress. This picture hung on our wall at our home in Hilo for years. I looked at this over and over again. And who would have ever thought in that moment, in October of 1984, that standing next to each other, this 10-year-old boy and Congressman Akaka would be the only Native Hawaiians to represent Hawaii in Congress since statehood. And on January 3rd of this year, at my request to the Akaka family, Milani and Auntie Millie, I returned Senator Akaka's Bible to Washington, and I took the oath of office on it. Today, Senator Akaka's Bible sits in my office, the Bible that Senator Akaka carried with him since 1983 when he received it at the National Prayer Breakfast. And now I take it to the weekly prayer breakfast in the house as a way to remember him, to honor him, to walk in his footsteps as a Native Hawaiian Oiwi leader. So you never know when you have an opportunity to change a child's life. And so when you come to Washington, D.C. with your family, with your keiki, when keiki come to Washington, D.C. to visit me, I go to those very exact same steps, down to the exact location, and that is where I take a picture because I hope one day, 30, 40 years from now, some 10-year-old child is going to represent Hawaii in Congress and be the next Native Hawaiian Oiwi leader. Mahalo for having my family, my team, and myself here today. Mahalo nui loa for your continued commitment to the advancement of your students and the future of our people. Best wishes for a productive day, and i mua Kamehameha. Mahalo.